Hey everybody, welcome to Season 5, Episode 19 of The Hard Truth Inside the Football Industry podcast with me, Philip Ideson, and Darragh MacAnthony, Chairman and owner of Peterborough United. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to record. We're just talking off mic there, hybrid of being sick, of traveling all over the place.
But here we are. I've been to Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, college visits, non-stop since getting back to the States. And then tomorrow I go to the UAE. You've been obviously in bits with the flu. Which I had in the UK. So it's like, people always think, oh, you're not doing the podcast because you're losing. Well, Posh have been losing a lot this season. We've still done 20 podcasts. So,
if I never did it when we lost, then there would have been no podcast the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And you're obviously always want to do it now because it's, the Bradford are flying. So, of course, there's nobody here saying we don't want to do it because we're losing football games. It was never about that. So, yeah, where do we start?
Let's talk about the last couple of weeks for you.
Sure.
So I think since we last recorded, you had the Bristol Rovers game,
okay.
And then Cheltenham in the EFL Trophy, Charlton and Stevenage. The Bristol Rovers, I think, was it Friday night?
Bristol Rovers was a Sunday, I want to say. It was on
Sunday.
TV.
Oh, it was Sunday. I knew it was. I had the chance to watch it, so I remember that much.
I watched it. We were good for about 15 minutes. We should have scored early on. Missed the sitter, and then obviously went to pieces, and Bristol Rovers won very comfortably. I think it was it 3-0 or 3-1?
3-1.
Yeah, just another disastrous away day.
Then you had Cheltenham in the EFL Trophy.
Yeah, I'm in the gaffer. Will hold his hands up there. That he made I think it's very clear that we're a certain formation at home, a certain formation away from home, and we played Walsall, who were the best team in League Two. Who'd won 9 in a row before, and we were at home when we went 4-2-3-1, which is our natural style at home, and we've done quite well at home the last couple of months. And for some reason, he went 3 at the back against Cheltenham, and it was a fucking disaster. And he held his hands up, and I'm so thankful at halftime he changed it. You know what I mean? So I was thinking, fuck me, this is all we need, with everything going on, to be like, almost humbled at home. And then to be fair to the players, they dug him out like big time in the second half. He went 4-2-4. What was really nice for me was that, 3 of our academy players came on at halftime: Hardy Mills, James Donnelly, and Ricky J. Jones. And they turned the game around, and we went 4-2-4, and we battered them in the second half. Yes, it was 3-2, but we battered them. And the 2 young fullbacks who've probably taken a lot of criticism, for not quite being, good all the time. We forget the times that when they do come in, and these lads are teenagers, and they're very good. They've got a lot of potential, a lot of upside. I think we, as owners, as coaches, as fans, probably forget that, they are teenagers at times, and they're in and out, and that should be the way it is, in and out, so they're not constantly being played. But I think, the manager was relieved. They dug him out. They bailed him out big time from what he described as his own error, how he started. So I get what he was trying to do. I think he had one eye on the away game at Charlton and played 3 at the back. But I think I said to him after the game, I said, Gav, we're a certain style at home, and I get we haven't won away from home since the old king died back in August. And you need to figure something out. You need to, play with that and change formations. But at home, 9 times out of 10, we're pretty good. And, we have to be on the front foot. So it was good, that was. And then we went to Charlton, and, fuck me. That was a tough watch. That was like, I remember a year ago going to Charlton, and we absolutely, I've never seen us dominate a football team for like an hour. We were away at Charlton, but that was a tough watch. I mean, not that Charlton were this, smooth passing team that, went through us. It was just a tough watch that we pretty much conceded possession to them. We were deep. Our attackers are 50 yards away, just the lack of confidence in us. And people would argue and go, oh, the manager's setting us up like this, and look how defensive minded we are. And there's three at the back, but it's really 7 at the back, because you've got your 5 at the back, you've got your 3 midfielders. So there's a lot of people back there. And the manager doesn't set us up like that. The manager specifically wants us to dominate possession. He wants us to get up the pitch. He wants us to press. He wants us to go forward and attack. And just everything about that game was kind of synopsis about what's been bad about us this season, where it wasn't pretty. We dug in, and we get to the second half. Fucking ref couldn't wait to give a penalty for, a handball. Okay, it's a penalty. Manny fucking tries dribbling down the fucking touchline, goes to ground, makes a challenge he shouldn't make. Is it a red card? I'm not sure. If the shoe was on the other foot, it would have been given against the Charlton player. Gives the red card. Then you're down to 10 man, and I'm just at that point with like 30 minutes to go. I'm like, we're fucked here. We're 1-0 down, we're down to 10 men. And then Ricky gets into the box, gets a penalty, we score, and then you're like, okay, maybe this is a bit of resilience. And the first hour being a really horrible watch. The last half an hour actually was better, even though we were down to 10 men. I don't know why, but we were resilient. We were really good on set pieces. But as usual, which has happened many times this season, the 89th minute strikes, they get a corner, and one of our players loses their man. And at that point, I just want to teleport myself to the pitch and say to that player, you and your teammates have spent 90 minutes, the last 30 heroic against 10 men. You've headed everything out of the box. You've marked your man. You've stayed with him. How the fuck did you lose him by 5 yards in the 90th minute, knowing there's only 5 minutes left in the game, with injury time, and you're going to get a really good point on the road against a team in flying form? What are you doing? And it's happened just so many times this season, you know what I mean? Bolton away, resilience, conceding injury time to a fucking set piece that goes into a penalty. Recently, it's just happened too much. And it just kills everything. It's forget about that we weren't good in the game or how we played, but just that despondency and disappointment of how bad we are, So
throwing away another point.
Yeah, and then I travelled to college the next day to visit the college with my daughter. I spoke to the manager, and it's just and he, I feel for him because he doesn't want to watch that, but he's like, look, we're just lacking confidence. It's amazing how confidence affects players, and people can go on about shit recruitment and all of that crap, and whatever else. But you had a midfield of Archie, Hector, you had the Man City boy in there. You've got a midfield capable of controlling the fucking game. I don't want to hear about bad recruitment. Do you know what I mean? They should be able to dominate any game against anybody in League One. 2 of them did it last year every week. So, you've got better defenders we brought in, we should be better.
Do you see it in the data? From a confidence perspective, then to look at, okay, this is why we're different in the data from what we expect from those players.
Yeah, well, you can see it in the data that they don't want to keep the ball as much. They don't want to pass the ball as much. They're not as progressive. They're not finding the areas that teams are pressing us more because they're feeling braver. They don't think we're going to, hurt them
as much. Risk. They feel there's less risk.
Yeah. Let's see if they do that with 𝗛𝗿𝗄𝗃 on the wing in 2 weeks' time. So you're going to have less people pressing you then, but. So, yeah, you see it in the data. You see that, people will go, well, the manager's setting them up like that. No, he's not setting them up like that. I know my manager. I know when we've in the past historically played 3 at the back, 4 at the back. I know his overall, what he wants to do. You have to go and watch us in training when they do shape and they do whatever else, how he wants us to play. They want to break the press. They want to get out and they want to basically get in behind. We're not set up to be counter-attacking 50 fucking yards away from our strikers. So really, really frustrating. Anyway. We went and played there, but as the manager was like, I've just got to get out in the training ground and just work with them. So we go to Stevenage. Stevenage has lost a few in a row. Crawley and friends had battered them. And then Stevenage, it was a draw. But I'll be honest with you, it's probably the best we've played away from home in months. We dominated possession. Didn't create enough chances in the first half. Grew into the game. Conceded the usual stupid goal, edge of the box, don't block the shot. It's not even a great shot. It really bounces into the fucking goal, and we can see the too many of them from distance. But we bounced back and scored a really good goal, and then you thought there's only one team in this. But I like the response. I like the character, as opposed to Bristol Rovers. We conceded, then concede again.
Yeah.
I like the fact that we looked better. I think it was also, maybe the way we set up. I think it was more like a 4-4-1-1, or someone say 4-5-1, but it was a 4-4-1-1 with Malik just off Ricky. We had our width back. The wingers looked dangerous. We didn't get them the ball enough. But there was signs there that, okay, we had the lion's share of possession. Our midfielders look comfortable. What we really need to do is a couple of key things we need to do. We really need to get our number 10 position up and running. And, Cricky, we signed in the summer and he's had a good run. The manager's given him games and it's not happening for him yet. But we need it to happen for him. And whoever goes in there, that's kind of a key fundamental position. I think we're okay out wide. We're okay in midfield. Yeah. You got Ricky, was he brilliant in the Stevenage game? Probably not his best game, but he's showing signs there, Ricky, that he's coming back to his best. That 10 position, we need, if it's Cricky, he needs to create a goal, score a goal. And I don't want to put too much pressure on him. It's a lot. It's his first season, but that little area there, we need to activate. It needs to happen. It's not been good enough. And I think the manager's played central midfielders in there. He's put Cricky in there. He's trying different things. So, yeah. It's frustrating, but we defended better. We were good. Stevenage are number 1, I think, for scoring set pieces. We defended them really well. Jed, the back line, they were strong. They were resilient. You know, there were signs, but those signs mean nothing if we can't go and show those signs against Huddersfield again, and then against Wrexham in the cup. So, you know, and everyone will be like, well, you know, you're 20th and you must be worried and you must be whatever else. I'm at the point where I can't spend my life obsessing about relegation. I can't spend my life obsessing about us being 20th. All I can do now is trust my staff to work hard, trust my players that they'll get us out of it. If they don't get us out of it, the club hasn't died. And I know no one wants to hear that. But like, you know, there's still so many things I go through my positive list every day. And, you know, there's still so many things I'm genuinely excited about, you know, regardless of where we are in the league, or, you know, and I'd said recently about, I expect us to fly up the table, and everyone was like laughing at that. And I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I'm blinded by something, but I just have an infinite belief that I think my team can win 3, 4, 5, 6 games. I do. I think, and you know, Poku's back in the end of this month. You know, we're starting to look stronger defensively. I think our wide players can get confidence back in them. I think we, and the other thing that kicked us in the balls was the Charlton game. Gustav Lindgren looked like he dislocated his shoulder, and his season's over. And I'm looking at it going, he didn't even hit the ground. He was hanging on one of their players, and you're thinking, fucking hell. And I'm still waiting to find out about that now.
You waited for so long for him to be able to play.
Oh man, and you know, and then he's been in games where he's 50 yards up there in his own, and you know, we're not, you know, yes, we created some chances for him, but there's a hell of a player in there. You know, there is, you know, him and Ricky started to look like a bit of a partnership, and some glimpses in some of the games, particularly against Cheltenham. So I don't know, you know, it's just been a, you think you're a foot forward, like, you know, against Cheltenham, and you know, you think, okay, you take that, and you go to Charlton, and when things aren't going well, the shit that happens to you, whether it's red cards, whether it's last minute goals, whether it's, you know, all those little, and you've been through this for quite a while. Do you know what I mean? You've been, you know, suffering in fucking painful, not silence, but you know, with things that have happened to Bradford. So, and I'm not looking for sympathy. We are where we are because we deserve to be where we are. So, but now it's down to my players. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing the non-football staff of the club can do. What we can do is do our best to support. So now it's down to them to,
are there things they can do in training to, you know, whether it's behind the scenes games or, you know, behind closed doors games, or to try and create the environment to help the players get confidence back, or does that never really recreate?
Yeah, it does. No, I always argue like playing players in the 21s games and getting the minutes and having your wingers beat men and score goals and creating goals. I think it helps, you know. And
realize they can still do this.
Yeah, I'm not a training ground expert, but I do know that you can work harder on the things you're not good at. If you're not good at taking throw-ins, you work on that. If your set pieces aren't good, you work on that. If your finishing isn't good enough, you work on that. You know, there's a lot. Look, our strengths as a football club are scoring goals. You know, we've got hung up for 3 months about clean sheets, and it's just like, you know, I don't know. I'm at the point now. I don't give a fuck about clean sheets. I care about scoring goals, because that showed against Cheltenham when we're dead and buried at 2-1 down and playing like crap. We went 4-2-4, and that's our strength. We found the spark because that's who we are. So if we're going to have to gunfight our way out of it, it's probably going to have to be by going fucking aggressively, like 4-2-4, and trying to score goals. Because if you're going to go to a Charlton, or you're going to go to Huddersfield, and you know, try and be resilient and but still play your game and whatever, I'm not sure that's going to work for us. So you know, I'd rather, it's almost like going into a fight against some of these heavyweights. And in the past, we always had a fighter's chance because we had that explosiveness in us.
Yeah.
So you know,
we create something from nothing.
Correct. And then all of a sudden, that fighter that you've given a bloody nose suddenly panics because they know that you're pretty good on offense. So then now they're a little bit more like, you know, instead of attacking you all the time, they're a little bit more like, ooh. And I think we've lost that with some teams. We've lost the fear factor. So, you know, we're one of the top scorers in the country. I think we need to basically remind people who we are. I think we need to give people a reminder. And I think when people get reminded that we're explosive and we can score 3, 4, 5 goals in a game, suddenly the respect level comes back. Suddenly the distances on the pitches of the pressing opens up more. Suddenly you're dominating possession again. I think all those things can happen. So that's what we have to do. We just have to use our strengths, and our strengths are pace, width, goals, you know, and going in behind. So I think that's what we need to like focus on, in my opinion. I'm not a manager. So, but that would be my message to my manager. You know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, go for it. Go for it. Every game you play, whether it's Birmingham, whether it's Huddersfield, you know, we have to go for it, you know, and we've shown this season, you know, 2-0 up away at Birmingham and places like that. We have it in us to score goals. And we have a good group of lads, and they're suffering like everyone else. And they're a young group, and I'm sure it's got to them, and I'm sure where we are has got to them, and the stuff out there, the negativity, which is quite normal when you're sucking so much of the time. has got to them. And at some stage, you have to let it all go. And at some stage, you have to go, okay, you know, talent only works with the talent of others. And I listened to that during the Super Bowl, and it was a great statement. Someone said, talent only works with the talent of others. So you could be the most talented player on the pitch, but you need all the other people with talent to come to the party. And we have a lot of talent. So that's my phrase for the manager. If I'm ever going to aspire, talent only works with the talent of others, you know, and that goes from the top to the bottom. So let's see what happens. It's obviously been a frustrating run. We have Huddersfield away, but
Yep.
you know, big club doing really well in the league. But we have to go there with the belief that we need 3 points.
Yep.
You know, we need 3 points. You know, 1
Big
point
pitch,
is good.
use your width.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
need 3 points. And like, if we're going to sit back and let them attack us, we'll lose the game. So you know, we have to go there with the mentality that whether it's fucking 4-3, 5-4, we need to win. So we're at that stage. You know, people around us are winning. You know, and it's like we want to fly up the table. Like I said, we need to start knocking off the wins, you know, in a row, and something we haven't done all season. So then we obviously have Wrexham in the cup.
Yep.
You know, the funny draw that I think there was a 9% chance that Birmingham would get a home draw, Wrexham would get a home draw if they got through
Funny how
against
that
Bolton,
works, isn't it?
and then they would stay separate from each other. So it was very low probability of that happening. So yeah. So anyway, so you guys today play Birmingham.
Yep. So who knows by the time this gets published whether the Hard Truth final is still on or not. Yeah, we've got Birmingham this afternoon or this evening, you know, UK time, and I mean, obviously we've got nothing to lose going there. It's going to be full house.
You're flying.
Yeah, but on the other hand, we beat Stockport away, we beat Rotherham away.
Yeah,
we've beaten League One teams away from home to get there.
Yeah.
And you see that, you know, there's a little bit of this in of perhaps complacency if they're already at Wembley. So it's for us to go there and did what we do last time we played in a
upset the apple cart.
Yeah, last time we played in Birmingham in a semi-final, we knocked Villa out of the League Cup semi to get to Wembley. So
I love
we've done it before.
You've got that belief in you. I can see it in your face, and I miss having that. You know, I need to get that colour back in my cheeks.
Yeah, like anything's possible.
Yeah, you know, I need to get that. My players need that colour in their cheeks back. My manager needs it back, where we expect to win every game we compete in, and we've lost that this season because of the amount of cuts, nosebleeds, knockdowns we've had. We've lost it. You know, where we're going out there, and you know, me, the fans, everyone's just worried. And
but it doesn't take long to get it back.
No, it doesn't.
You know,
that's my point. 1 or 2 wins, and you're like, you know, you're there, and it doesn't take long. You're absolutely correct, and it's like you know, you just need to get those couple of results put together, and then you just go bang, and that's kind of what I've been waiting for 7 months.
Right.
It's
that's it. You know, you hope that time comes, but you know, you think at Christmas, you know, everyone's shouting for Alexander to be sacked, and you know, we're on a poor run, and I think we've got the best run in the country since the turn of the year.
So let's talk Bradford. So let's talk the last 2 weeks.
And so we lost Wimbledon. I don't know if we covered that or not on the last podcast. 1-0. Just you know, one of those games where one chance kind of decided it. We went to Rotherham, beat Rotherham away in the EFL Trophy 1-0, and Rotherham played pretty much their first team, and it was definitely deserved win. Well, you know, it wasn't you know, lucky or anything like that. We went there and got a result that we deserved. We had Harrogate at home, typically a bit of a bogey team. Beat them 1-0. We then had Accrington at home, beat them 1-0.
You're the new Arsenal.
We've not been scoring, but I think we've conceded 6 this year or something. And then on Saturday we had Newport away, and we're down to 10 men after 14 or 15 minutes.
Jesus.
Awful sending off. He deemed that it was a last man, you know, professional foul, bit of grappling, 40 yards out. There's a covering defender.
You know how I feel about the officials this season.
Yeah, it was awful. And this official, you know, you're kind of warned about. I think it was only his 6th ever EFL game. And in the last one, he sent off a Crew player and gave a penalty for grappling in the area against Wimbledon, I think it was. The game before that, he sent a Port Vale player off for what seemed dubious. And so he's already getting a bit of a name for himself there in 6 EFL games.
He shouldn't be in any more EFL games with that kind of
No,
record.
I mean, he shouldn't
And
make it to 10.
they should be looking at that and basically retraining. Like when you've got a referee with multiple sending offs, that's not a coincidence. That's oversight over the top. Like,
yeah, and I think the other two got appealed successfully. I'm not sure that we even bothered appealing because it's a 1-match ban, and every time we've appealed this season, what seemed to be some crazy red cards, we lose the appeal. So anyway, 0-0. So it was 15 minutes gone, down to 10 men, and ironically, we looked better with 10 men than 11. And while of course we were, I was happy that we managed to really fight out a draw. Graham Alexander afterwards, well, I thought we had the better chances. I'm disappointed we didn't win.
fair play.
So, that was kind of, we went away with it. Yes, happy with the point. Point kept us in 3rd place, which is good, because they're so close up there still.
Hasn't Walsall had a wobble?
Yes, they did. They won finally on Saturday, but I think that gap has gone down to 7 or 8 points from 15. It was only what 3 or 4 weeks ago when we beat them. Basically, was the start of their wobble.
No. When Peterborough beat them,
well, when you beat them,
just before you,
you beat them like a week beforehand.
They won 9 in a row until we played them, and then we beat them, and then you beat them. But listen, I'm happy to give you guys the glory. There's nothing really for us to be glorious about this season.
And so we were against 𝗛𝗿𝗃 on Saturday for Newport.
How did he look?
He was fine. Newport didn't really make that much of an impact. He came off, I think, maybe 70 minutes or so as they were trying to mix things up. But it wasn't like he was bad, and I don't think he wasn't the best player on the pitch either.
How's Romoney done for you? Has he been back in the team?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about that transfer deadline day. No. So Romoney came back, of course, straight into the team, and he's looked really good. He's
good
been his first game back. He was solid. He made a couple of probably a couple of mistakes that came from rustiness.
Sure.
And I think also there's probably a different expectation on him now than what there was in the team that he was in previously.
Okay.
Because of how well the team is doing, he's stepping into a team full of confidence and he's not played for a while.
And your left back's flying, your wing back is flying, so he's playing next to somebody who's like pretty. I presume he's playing left side. Is he over 3?
He was, yeah. And then he was he missed a game. Then he came, I think, on as sub. We've really been rotating the defense.
Okay.
We've been rotating most of the team because it's been relentless. Saturday, Tuesday for 6 weeks, which is one of the positives I think right now with the squad that we've got is that we are doing that rotation rather than just.
Ryan reached out to me on the day before deadline day. It was a Sunday, the Bristol Rovers game, and then on Monday I was in TalkSport and on Sky.
Yeah.
And he'd messaged me on the Sunday night and said, "What's going on with Rome?" And I said, "Well, we've offered him, some money to go, because obviously he was on a hefty wage with us, and that would have been until the end of July. Because in football, even though contracts run out in June, by the PFA rules, you have to pay their full wages in July. So you start adding up those numbers. So we'd offered him a check. Him and his agent obviously had said no at the time. And obviously Ryan came on and said, "Look, we have X amount, in our budget." And I said, "Well, I'm not doing a loan." I said, "If you want him, you got to sign him permanently." I said, we will pay him up a figure. And I said, "You're going to have to match the difference." And I said, "There's no negotiating. That's it. I'll give him the figure I've always had in mind. He'll get that. He will sign off. We will sign him off. And then you can sign him on a permanent." So I said, "Why don't you talk with his agent and him?" And I said, "I'd imagine he'd want to walk back to Bradford at this stage because he's not playing and you guys are flying." And I said to Barry, "Tell his agent and him, that figure won't, there ain't a pound, not more."
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, he's pretty much getting all his money. A lot of the time footballers don't. They'll take less money because they can go out there and get a new club and da. And fair play to him, he did it and we did it, and it was a pretty seamless thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because our left side centre half went down the day before, so I think there was a gap there that suddenly needed filling.
It was, and it was right after the Bristol Rovers defeat when Ryan's messaging me. I was like, there's part of me like fucking, it's like,
I don't want to talk to anybody about football.
I didn't want to talk to anybody. But at the end of the day, look, the kid's a good kid. I think it's a great move for him. Do you know what I mean? Yes, it's good for us too. But I just thought, no, that's ideal for him. You know, he's back in an area that he's comfortable in. It's a team flying for promotion, and yeah, so it was like there was no, you know, give us a transfer fee or do this or do whatever, or me pulling back and going. I could have been a cunt and turned around and said, well, I'm not writing a check. If you want him, you've got to pay his wages till the end of July. I just thought at that point, what's the point in doing that? Yeah. So let's just let him go. It hasn't worked out for us. Hasn't worked out for him. He hasn't let us down. He's never been a problem. He's been very, you know, very good around the training ground. You know, some players can be problematic. He was never like that. And yeah, it's really funny because I got asked questions last summer when people were in from, I think it was Ryan as well.
Yeah, we talked about it, didn't we?
Yeah, well, you know, what's Rome's character like, and is he problematic? And we never in 2 years had a problem with him. Like, so I don't know where all that shit came from. Sometimes like stuff gets attached to players, which is unfair. Because my manager, we talk all the time. He'd ring me about, well, you know, that player's late for training, or that player has done this, or that player is a bit of a, you know, a negative influence on the training ground. I don't think once in 2 years we've ever had a conversation about Rome that's been. The only thing we ever had with Rome was we couldn't find him one day, and we were concerned for his welfare, which can happen with players because we track where all our players are, and we couldn't get him on the phone. And Liz was trying, and the manager was trying. It was like a Sunday, and I think he'd gone for a long walk, and turned his phone off. You know, so but it was nothing that had been a precursor to that. It was just we were doing checks on all our players. You know what I mean? Because you have to for testing and make sure you know where the players are. But no, I wish him well. You know, I mean, the kid's had like, you know, some tough stuff happen in his life. So, you know, it'd be really, really good for him now to be a promotion winner with Bradford. So I presume you guys will, if he keeps doing well, you give him a longer contract. Is he with you just for the summer?
Well, we gave him a 6, but we have an option on another year.
Yeah.
So I imagine that we'll take up the option, you know, unless something, you know, the bottom falls out and suddenly there's no funding. But I can't imagine a world where we don't take up his option.
No, absolutely not. You know, absolutely not. I think he, you know, he while it didn't work out with us, there's a player in there. You know, there's a reason we recruited him. It just didn't work. You know, so you know, at the end of the day.
And we had a question from Bantam Pete who actually asked, "Why did you feel it didn't work out for Romoney at Peterborough? And where do you see his best position?"
I think his best position is you know, in a 3, and I think, you know, the left side of a 3. I maybe because of our style of overpassing, maybe didn't suit him. I'm not saying he's a bad passer, but obviously his side, Ronnie, was kind of in last year.
Right.
You know, when he came in the first year, kind of he was in the team, he was out of the team with a couple of clean sheets early on, but then Ronnie got put in there left side centre half, and it's Ronnie. So you know, he was. When we're playing forward at the back, he wasn't going to displace Ronnie or Josh Knight. So that frustration probably ebbed away at him. That's really why it didn't work out. And then it gets to the end of the season, the manager's like, well, you're not for me anymore because I've just had a year and you couldn't break in. And do I see you replacing Ronnie Edwards? No, you know, that kind of thing. So just that happens in football. It doesn't mean they're not good enough. It just means for whatever reason, at a certain club, it doesn't happen. And then they move on and they become, you know, what they are at another club. So I can never describe that. I don't pick teams. I don't pick tactics. I don't tell players where to play. There's a footballer in there. You know, does he have moments of concentration lapses? Like every centre half. Can he make a mistake? Like every centre half. Is he a non-league defender? Absolutely fucking not. Right. You know, I was amazed nobody came in from last August, you know, and because I always felt he could do a job, the top of League Two, you know, pretty much anywhere in League One if he was on his game. So what is he, 25, 26 now?
Not even, I don't think he's that.
Is he not? Right. Okay. Well, all I'm saying.
Maybe 24, 25. I don't know.
He'll have a good career, you know. So, you know, he's got his head screwed on. And like I said to you, there's nothing I would say about him as a character, as a person. It's not good for a dressing room. So, you know, maybe Bradford's where it's at. Maybe that's where he should have gone to when he was on a free transfer and whatever else. So, you know, and
I mean, you can't blame him for trying. And
no, absolutely not. No,
and he got an opportunity. You know,
he got an opportunity at a team at a top League One who was in a promotion race last year, won a trophy. You know, whereas in the playoffs, that's why he came to us because he you know, eyes on the championship. So, absolutely don't blame him. We obviously offered him more money because you know, wage cap wise, we could. So you know, there's a difference in the disparity in League Two and League One. Bradford's a bigger club than Peterborough because no one's arguing about that. But when you're talking about moments in time, you know what I mean? For him as an ambitious footballer and what we do with players, of course he was going to choose us. So, you know, now he's going to Bradford, you know, he wins a promotion, we get our act together. We're all playing in the same league next year. So, you know, which would be interesting. So we'll have the hard truth games where maybe we'll have to watch those games together and film them.
I know. That'll be fun. As long as we win.
Yeah, as long as we win. 2-0.
So we didn't talk much about transfer deadline. Except for Romoney just there. It was a couple of weeks ago, but we haven't recorded since. We talked before deadline day that you might be making there might be some big outgoings, and they never materialized.
No, we had it was really, really weird. We accepted a deal, I think everyone knows now, of Norwich for Manny, which is a fabulous deal for us, for him. And they were giving him back to us on loan. Norwich are a very progressive club. They do what we do in a different way, not in a different way, at a different level, where they buy lower league talent, develop them with the idea of, they saw Manny as a project where he would go back on loan with us for 6 months. Next year, he would basically improve under their coaches, break into their team. And then within 2 years, they'd probably sell him to a Brentford for like 15 to 18 million. Because he's a Brentford type centre half. He's big, he's strong, you know what I mean? And whatever. And, Manny's got all the tangibles. He has a concentration issue, but that's from not playing even 50 league games. And, Norwich saw him, their scouts had spent a lot of time watching him, and they weren't the only ones. And they saw him as a real project. And that was a hell of a deal for us, for him. And for whatever reason, him and his brothers turned the move down, which just blew my mind and blew my manager's mind and everybody. And I sat with him. I drove down to the training ground. It was the Saturday. He'd been concussed all week, and I thought it was the concussion. I was still convinced it was the concussion that he'd received in the game before, because I sat with him and said, Norwich is one of the best football clubs in the Championship. We've sold players to Norwich over the years. I think Barry said we've sold 5 players to Norwich. They've all gone on to win promotion to the Premier League. It's a massive football club, massive opportunity. And I think he was nervous. It was too soon. It's the first time I've ever heard. Usually our players can't wait to jump on the jet and go to a big club and whatever. And I think he was nervous. And I think that probably ended up pissing Norwich off. And I'd be the same if I were them. But I think when you go below the surface, Manny's had some grief in his life over the last 18 months. He had a lot of things happen. And I don't think he took the best advice from those around him. And I think he was nervous. So, I dare say Norwich will probably try and do it again in the summer. And if not them, someone else. Because Manny at 23 is a magnificent prospect. Regardless of the mistakes he makes and some of the stuff maybe our fans think about him, he's got everything to be top defender. He's fucking massive. He's a colossus. He wins everything in the air. He wins 80% of his headers. The average percentage of headers for centre halves is 53%. That blows up statistically. He can play out with the ball. When he's concentrating, he can be an unbelievable defender. So with the right coaching and improvement in games, he could be, when you look at Ethan Pinnock, who's gone to Brentford and where he started at Forest Green, and, I looked at a player like 𝗛𝗏𝗂𝗁 the other night for Everton when they nicked that game against Liverpool. He was in Walsall, I think, in League Two, and then went to Brentford and on. And I apologise if I've got that wrong, but he's got a lot of tangibles. So anyway, it didn't happen. The good news was we were getting him back on loan. So it wasn't like we were losing a player. We had bids, obviously, for Ricky. We had 5 clubs in the Champ who bid for Ricky. He didn't want to go to any of them, which is fine. That's his prerogative. So, and it was really, really funny. Like, it blew my mind. Obviously, 𝗛𝗿𝗄𝗁, we knew a lot of clubs were going to buy him in January, and then he got the injury. But obviously, clubs like Burnley and co were looking to buy him in January, when he was fit, and when he was in the team. Obviously, he got the injury, and they've now obviously parked that. They need players in January to help. But we had, I'm sat in the Talk Sport studios. We were in this bunker basement of what used to be Talk TV in the studio, and there's 45 minutes to go in the window. And I'm obviously checking my emails on the breaks. And in my inbox is an email from a Championship club, another one, for 𝗛𝗏𝗄𝗁.
Right.
With 45 minutes to go in the window. To be fair, it was a good offer. It was 3 and 3. And I basically was like, what the hell? So I rang Barry. I said to Jim White, and I was in the studio, look, I've got to step out for a second. I rang Barry and I said, why is this club coming in 45 minutes before the window closes? I don't understand. If they'd come to us a week ago, and we were always going to insist that 𝗛𝗏𝗄𝗁 had to come back to us on loan.
Yeah.
But I get why clubs were trying to do business, because the problem they're going to have in the summer is there's going to be 20 clubs trying to sign him.
Yeah.
If somebody had been clever and signed them in January and loaned them back, they would have one of the best wingers in the Championship next year. So yeah, so in the end, that was like, we thought the Manny one was the only one we were going to do. Yeah, other clubs came in for Hector late on in the window, but he wanted to stay, and help us, and then go in the summer. So that is what it is. And then we didn't really. I'd said to the manager the week leading up, "Do you need anything? Do you want anything?" And he was just like, "Look, we've got enough players. I've got players coming out of my backside on the training ground." And he said, "We can't just keep signing 4 players every time we lose a game of football." Like after the Bristol Rovers game, I was like, "Are you sure you don't need it?" And he's like, "Chairman," he said, "What are you going to do? Sign another new back four?" So you've just done that. You're going to sign another midfielder? We've got 5 central midfielders. He said, forwards, strikers, wingers. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And he said, let me do my job. He said, trust me to do my job and my staff. And he said, we have a rebuild to do. We did a little bit of it in January, some good signings, and then we're going to do the rest of it in the summer. So we know what we got to do, regardless of what league we're in. There will be changes in the summer. There will be personnel coming in. There will be people leaving. There'll be lessons learned from turning down bids in the summer and not letting players leave that maybe should have left and they haven't been at their best because of it. We're not going to make that mistake again. So there's all of that. And then in between all of that, I have a meeting with the academy, Dan, who runs the academy. And, whenever I'm down, that's something that just gives me a massive buzz. Like I'm in Dan's office and he pulls up this board. You have to remember we turned Cat 2 4 years ago. I'm going to give a lot of credit to Jason, my ex-partner, who's, forced us and pushed us to do that. And it was one of the best things we've done. And on this board, he said, forget about some of the 18s now. He said, they were from the Cat 3. He said, what you got to look at is the 14s and the 15s. They've really had the benefit of the extra coaching and the money and the facilities. And he put up on the board 7 players that are 14, turning 15. And I shouldn't talk about this, but those players can be stolen and we'll only get like 400 or 500 grand for them now, like we did with the boy who went to Newcastle in the summer. And he was like, see those players there? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, every one of those players, I'll put my career on this, will be in your first team within 3.5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
That's how good they are. And there was defenders, there was wingers, there was strikers. I mean, it was just 7. And then he said, worst case, he said, if you need a few quid or the club needs a few quid to reduce debts and without selling a first team player, he said you could sell all 7 of them and raise 4 or 5 million quid, to the clubs that want them now. And I said, no, we don't want to do that. We can't keep doing that. Like, selling a 14-year-old for 500 grand is great in the moment. But like that player could be worth 8, 9, 10 million.
That's what we do. We've had to do that for the years.
We've got to get away from doing that. Of course, I want to reduce debt. Of course, I want to, we spent a lot of money during this rebuild and we brought a lot in, but I can't keep selling talent. We lost one to Newcastle in the summer, a wide player that was 14 that, again, could have been we've got a striker at the moment in our 18s who's basically, he's going to be in our first team next year. And we've just met with him and his family. And the good news is they've signed pre-pro deals and everything else. And this kid's basically 16. He's played in the 18s all season. He's got 20 goals in the 18s. The 18s didn't have a game 2 weeks ago. You love this. And they dropped him down to play in the 16s. We won the game 6-5. And he scored all 6 goals.
Yeah.
All right. And here's 2 more things. He's quicker than Ricky and he can finish. So, he and I think the manager's had him training this week with the first team. We've met with his parents because he's now at that age, 16, turning 17, where now we get into the professional side of the game.
Yep.
We can't keep losing players like that. Those are the players that have to be with us for 2 or 3 seasons. And, so there's so much to be optimistic about there. When I sit with all the youth coaches in the academy and go through it and, the talent coming through, we've even got a kid from India that, they were saying to me, he's a centre half, I believe. And he's like captain of the 14, 15s. They're like, he's special. He's like very special. And I don't know why I mentioned he's from India, because that's usually a Sky Sports thing, the first Asian player to do whatever else. But, it would be incredible,
Yeah, scouting from, non-traditional.
Yeah.
Locations.
I love it. You know what I mean? And you always think, well, there's so many people who live in the UK now that's multicultural, that why don't we have more people from different backgrounds, So, but this kid looks like the real deal. You know what I mean? So amongst many others in that group. So we've got bubbling under the surface there. As shit as it's going this season, as much as we want to moan about relegation and 20th and da-da-da-da-da, fuck me, we're good to go in that neck of the woods. Like we're going to see some real players coming through over the next few seasons. And then after that, there's going to be even more. So that's what we always wanted. That is how we get rid of all debt. That is how we have unbelievable training facilities. That is how we establish ourselves permanently as hopefully a championship, top 3 League One side all the time, without the financial pressure of constantly having to spend millions to buy players, which we'll still do along the way.
And that, the deficit that you start every season with, that you've got to find a way to recover.
Correct. That 5 million or whatever hole we have every year, and we have to sell players. And we all met collectively in like recruitment in January and spoke about the reason we've got caught on the deficit and the loans and all of that is because in the past we'd always sell one number 9 for 4 to 6 million, and that would take care of the whole deficit. You wouldn't have to sell 3-4 players. Because we haven't had those stereotypical number 9 scoring 30 goals, Ivan Toney, like, for a while. We've been selling left backs and centre halves and wingers. So we need to get back to, and we think Gustav's that kid. You know what I mean? And whatever else. Ricky will go for a lot of money in the summer, but we think Gustav's the one that a good pre-season, golden boot next year, £6 million plus sale. That basically takes out your whole deficit in one go, and then you're under no pressure to lose any more in your core, team. So, there's lessons to be learned there.
So it's fair to say that, the Posh fans at the moment haven't seen the Gustav that you believe he can become. What is it about him, that excites you so much?
His movement reminds me of 𝗛𝗿𝗂𝗧𝗿𝗂𝗁𝗂. He's deceptively quick. He's got pace. He's got vision. I think when he gets the physicality of the league, I think he's going to be a hell of a player. He's an unbelievable finisher. He didn't show that in the first Rovers game. But when you see his movement, he's making runs only Championship and Premier League strikers make. I saw it in 𝗛𝗿𝗂𝗧𝗿𝗂𝗁 when I signed him. I saw him make runs for Dagenham that nobody in League Two were making. So if you get a player behind him, and I'm hoping that's Cricky, and I think it will be, who's basically going to find him every time, what you're then going to have is you're going to have a player that will score a lot of goals, will technically look amazing on the eye, will make the kind of runs that scouts from higher up will look at and go, this player can play a lot higher. So, and he's 23. He's at that age. He's a good age. He has one good season. He's going to the moon.
All right. Well, let's just cover a couple of non-Posh and City items. And I did want to bring up, because you can't move for it on social media the last 24 hours or so, was Everton's opening game in the new stadium and the test game that they had. And, it's interesting when you think about Spurs and the challenges that Spurs are having. Great stadium. Did that take away from investment in the team? You look at Arsenal, they put all the money into building a stadium. And they'd struggled for years and years and years.
15 years to
Everton, they've had all their financial problems because of the investment in the stadium.
They have no problem. They've got their new owners.
Is it worth the investment?
It is worth the investment, and you have to do it. And it's like us spending nearly £1 million on the shop and other things around the stadium at our place, because it is. If you want to be able to get above PSR, financial fair play, you have to have the income. And those old stadiums don't give you the income. Right. Like where we are at the moment, if our stadium was upgraded or we're in a new stadium, our income would be 2.5 times the amount of match day. That allows me then to more of a level playing field with the bigger clubs. There are deals I can't do in transfer windows because I'm hamstringed on financial fair play. Everton have had a lot of historical issues, but they've got a new ownership group. With that new stadium now, they will be able to get past all this where they haven't been able to spend properly for 2 or 3 years. And probably in 12, 15, 18 months' time, they could be one of the biggest spenders, because they have that income coming in. From doing 500 grand a match game, you could be doing 3 million a match game like Spurs are doing. Sometimes 5 million a match game. You start taking European home games and cup home games, throw it all in, it's a lot of money. So I think it is going to be fantastic for Everton. Very good for them. They've obviously got their manager back, who's doing great. Nicked the point off my mighty Reds, in injury time. Referee playing 4 minutes past injury time. I think Everton will do well, and I think it'll take time. But I am a big fan and proponent of the Spurs thing. I don't buy. That I didn't spend. I looked at the table the other day. Spurs still spent since they built the stadium. They have a wealthy ownership group behind it. For whatever reason, they've had a nightmare injury-wise off the pitch. They need to fix that. I still fancy them to win the European trophy they're in. And that'll just calm all the Spurs fans down. But what Spurs now have is the capacity to, stay within PSR and sign the best players. You don't ever see Spurs having to sell a 19-year-old for PSR reasons like Newcastle. So ask Newcastle, they get 50,000 every week. If that was in a brand new stadium with a different, design and whatever else, they'd probably double the revenue. So those things have got to happen. It's a natural progression for football clubs.
It's such a hard when you played in a traditional stadium, that is iconic and that is part of the soul of your football club. That thinking about moving away to something that's purpose built.
Yeah.
I think it is. I understand why it's a difficult decision, but you even see some of the interviews with Everton fans who were there last night, and they're talking now in glowing terms about what the new stadium is.
Yeah, it's modernisation.
Leaving Goodison.
I'm a traditionalist like the best of us, but at the same time, I'm not a fool. You can't bury your head in the sand. You can't live in the same old house for 300 years without upgrading it or maybe moving to a newer one. If you go and buy a house now, are you looking at houses that are 20 years old, or are you looking at houses that are 5 years old? Most people now are looking for homes that are built in the last 5 years. Newer roofs, newer design, newer this, contemporary. People want new. You're always going to have people who are still the ultra traditionalists who don't want to move, but progress is going to happen. And, for these clubs and us clubs, all of us clubs, Bradford and Peterborough in 50 years' time won't be playing in the same stadiums.
Right.
They won't. That's going to be evolution. That's going to happen. So, it has to happen.
No, I feel for us, obviously we've got the attachment that we do with Valley Parade for all the historical reasons we do, but
but Man City we have the attachment to Main Road, and they've won titles at this new stadium. So does anyone remember the attachment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whether it's financially viable or not is a whole different matter. But there's been talk about us trying to buy Valley Parade back, and that happened. There was talk about that a year ago from our landlord, and it's not really gone anywhere. And I'm not really surprised that it's not gone anywhere just because of a valuation difference. But I feel as though for us, we'd probably we're better putting our money somewhere else than in buying a stadium.
You're better doing a Luton, and it's not going to happen until you have a couple of promotions. But I've always said this: when your stadium's teeming with 25,000 people flowing out onto the streets of the city, people know the financial impact that stadium will have. A new stadium will have. I'm telling you now, Luton are going to have a new stadium in a couple of years, and that's all because they've gone up through the leagues. They've got to the Premier League. It will happen for Bradford. It'll happen for Peterborough as well. Might not happen as soon as we all want it to happen, but it's going to happen. And I think staying in some of the current old places, it's cheaper to move than it is to renovate, actually, when you start pricing up stadiums. I've had all the prices. Our new stadium was 70 million. To renovate where we are and buy all the properties around us and do all the stuff that needs to be done was like 90 million. It's like a 20 million quid difference. Yeah. So, moving has to happen. And not only that, if you get enough land, you can attach your academy, you can attach more facilities, you can do all those things, and also you want to make it 365 days a year open for business. And from what I remember going to Bradford, it wasn't ideal for that. If you wanted to have property shows and car shows and all of that, and concerts, and you're going to need to move.
It's a bad location to get to, and there's no parking.
But that revenue is so important to pay for the cost of the stadium, and that's why it's like key that sometimes you have to move where you are. So it's going to happen. It's just like I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know when.
No, I feel like we should be putting if there's money available to invest in infrastructure for us, it should be training facilities as much as it is
100%. Like us with the academy.
Yeah, exactly. Own the training facilities. And if you're a championship club, you've got more money to play around with.
That's my next spend. Like the next thing I'm doing is there's some land near our training ground. We're going to try and get the land. We want to put 3 more pitches in. We want to relocate some of the academy. We want to go upwards horizontally where we are in our training ground for more facilities, better gym, hydro pool, all those things. Because the value in our academy and improving those facilities is key. So the next crunch of money that we're going to invest when we get a chance, whether it's this season or the season after, is going to go into our training ground and the expansion of that. Because right now our training ground's teaming with Foundation has got camps going on. They've got the women's team. They've got all the other things. It's too busy. Our training ground's too busy. For a Cat 2 academy, it's too busy. We need more space. We need to move people. We need the space, and we need to progress. So that's going to happen. And that's probably going to cost us, the pitches and the buildings and what we need to do. It's going to be a couple of million. So that needs to happen. So that's kind of my next thing on the wish list. You know what I mean? To make the training ground somewhere everyone doesn't want to leave. They don't want to leave. They want to stay at work. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that and fans sometimes don't understand that, like I did with the shop and the this and that. We have to keep improving those facilities. So that's important.
And actually, there's a question. I'm just browsing questions from Daniel, who's a Posh fan, asking about the latest with the ground. We kind of covered it, but his question was: would it ever get to the point where you decide just to redevelop? Like the London Road End or the main stand versus...
No, I can I see us being at the current place for the next 5 years? Yes. Can I see us spending a lot of money on the interior of the stadium? No, because I don't think it's something we would be sensible in doing. So we have to relocate the stadium. We have to get some land. Look, first thing I've got to do is I've got to improve what we're doing on the field. Second thing I've got to do is get rid of all the debt we carry. It's a lot less than it was 2 years ago, but I want to chip away at it. I want to get down to under like the 2 million mark where it's negligible. And get some like-minded people to invest with me, and then start building bridges with the council, the new council, or whoever the council would be at the time. Repair all those bridges, which can be repaired, and then get the city of Peterborough to embrace, the future. And the future is a multi-purpose stadium that's going to be great for the city, not just for Peterborough United Football Club. So there you go. Let's end it on that.
All right. Well, there's one last question, which is from Ricky. Ricky said, do owners keep track of managers and are always having an idea on who they might want to come in if they lose their manager, citing Wycombe losing Matt Bloomfield, and then quickly turn that around with a new appointment?
No, I mean it's not something I'd want to do. And when we're not winning, I hate it. I get agents sending me managers' names. Swanee, don't be making any articles that look inflammatory. But it drives. I block quite a few agents over January over that, because I find it insulting. I've got one of the best managers in our league. We're having a shit season. He knows that. I know that. That's a collective responsibility amongst all of us. But it doesn't change the fact he's the best manager in League One, in my opinion. And I think he's relishing the challenge now of fixing it, and then fixing it again in the summer with me and Barry. So I haven't got a magic list of managers. You always know the usual people on the up, and the people who are basically out there. But it's not something I've gone to a notebook and I've started making notes on. So that's my answer.
All right. Well, let's leave it there for today. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for everyone for listening.
No worries.
As always, please feel free
Bradford
to
today. Come on, boys.
Questions. Yeah.
Come on. 𝗛𝗿𝗂 final.
Hopefully next time we talk, we've broken the EFL dream final.
Upset everyone. Upset the American TV channels, the EFL, everybody. Let's do this. Anyway.
All right.
All right, my man.
We'll talk to everybody again soon. Take care, everyone.